Discuss budget, and I'd ask to establish a quorum. I'd ask Clerk Spencer to call the roll, please.
Gutenkopf.
Here.
Pezza.
Here.
Shea.
Here.
Leader.
Here.
Rose.
Here.
Graham.
Here.
Hipskin. Absent. York.
Here.
Nybo.
Here.
Healy.
Here.
Morley.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Mulliner. Here. Wagner.
Here.
13 present, 1 absent.
13 present, 1 absent. We officially have a quorum, and we are going to continue review of the budget 2010-2011. I will turn it over to City Manager Borchert, and we will hopefully get through, trying to be out of here by 10:15 ideally, but we'll do the best we can what we have. No pressure.
I think, to your collective credit, I think the council's in a very solid position relative to completing its review to allow for a proper and orderly approval of the resulting ordinance after some review for items the first time this evening, and then, as the mayor, as you suggested, I think after the committee meetings next Monday, we'll revisit items that you'd like to circle, that you've already circled, items you wish to circle tonight. We'll revisit those items, revisit the financial oversight, and set the stage then for the ordinance the following week. What's left is P through Z on the Committee of the Whole agenda. Begins with the senior services area, health and welfare, page 171 of the budget book. I think you're going to find for most items this evening, it's a repeat of what's been done for the most part in the past. We've reviewed those items, reviewed those areas of service, have trimmed them a little bit where possible, and where it's appropriate to continue on, we've tried to allow for those items to continue on, which is the case with senior citizen, the taxi cab service for seniors and handicapped, support for the DuPage Family Service area, which is on a contractual basis, providing higher level of service to the Elmhurst community than what would otherwise be available from that DuPage Family Service group. Support for the Youth Commission as they support various youth endeavors within the community. That's what page 171 is.
Very good. Very good. And just so everybody knows, this does include the taxi service subsidy that we give to seniors, Meals on Wheels, counseling services through Metropolitan Family Services. I know which.
At the Ride DuPage, which I believe is a very appropriate quality program, quality service that would expand services. Desirable. I'd like to be able to recommend that we get to that point, but we just couldn't get it in this year's budget. But it will be one of the items, I think, from a staff perspective, we would wish to revisit as soon as possible.
Very good, very good. And many of us were out on the list. The senior excursion, Alderman Wagner, Alderman Pezza, Alderman Gutenkopf, Alderman York, and Alderman Hipskin were all out, and Alderman Kennedy. I can't leave out Big Jim over there. And actually got to see firsthand the different levels of housing that we have to offer here, from subsidized housing for seniors, affordable housing, which I think is great that we have. And we actually met a woman by the name of Rose, and I found her because my wife's name is Rose, and she said she could not afford to be in this facility if it wasn't for Elmhurst and the subsidy that the program that it has, and that's right here at Greencastle. So I think all of us are really kind of impressed and touched by the impact that we as a community make on our seniors. We have the largest senior population in DuPage County, so, and I know Alderman Rose and I are both involved with Metropolitan Family Services, which does a lot of the counseling for not only seniors but also for youth, all the way up cradle to grave, offers a lot of the respite services for seniors, et cetera. So I think it's important that we take care of our seniors and we make sure that we keep the quality of life in this community the way we're used to having it, and that's at a high level. So any questions or discussion on this particular item at 171? Alderman Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just if you could, City Manager Borchert, just 1 or 2 additional sentences on what the Senior Citizens Council grant is and the Seniors Assistant Program is.
The Senior Council grant is for the home repairs And the Meals on Wheels, where we pay for part of that, and then the users, the consumers of those services pay for a significant amount of it, but not all of it. There's a slight subsidy provided by the agency, which is provided through the city of Elmhurst.
Commissioner and Chairperson Jordan actually took me out last week. It was mayors delivering meals. So all the mayors, Mayor Mueller from Lombard, Mayor Hartwig from Addison, were all out delivering meals to the seniors last week. And it was really impressive to me to go to a ranch, and actually see the senior in a hospital bed in the front room in their own house, grateful to get a meal. They got a hot meal and a cold meal for later. So. You know, I was very touched, and then I had Miss Munson, who I mentioned that the city subsidizes the Meals on Wheels, and she goes, "No, I pay for this." She goes, you know, she was very proud, great lady, and but we give the opportunity to senior. They send them a bill, but the senior pays what they can afford. If they can't afford it, then we pay the rest.
Right.
So I think it's a great program. It's also a wellness check program, so that if they get a knock on the door daily, and if there's nobody home or nobody answers, then Chief Neubauer, Chief Cop, dispatches an officer or fire department person to check on that person. So it's a way we can make sure that they're safe as well too. So it's great, nutritious meals, balanced meals, and it's a wellness check, which I think is huge. So
Did you also speak to the Seniors Assistant Program? I thought that was what the funds of the Senior Citizens Council grant funded.
Yeah, the senior assistance, I think that's the subsidy to the Family Service Association.
That's the family services piece? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And I know we get in our monthly packet, we get our number of constituents being served by Metropolitan. Mm-hmm. It's somewhere in the 30, 40, 50 range, and it's again, it's children, it's teen programs, it's mentoring programs, all the way to senior programs. Help with seniors that have caregivers, their spouse is a caregiver, and it gives the caregivers a break so that they can go out and shop. And they have volunteers. There's a waiting list of around 30. So if people are looking to volunteer for this, they can read to a senior and spend some time with a senior, et cetera. So great programs that we help fund, and also look for help with volunteers to help fund them as well. So, questions, anybody? Alderman Rose?
Commissioner, I just want a clarification, excuse me, on this, which is the Senior Citizens Council grant. The majority of that, my understanding, is the care and repair project, right? Is that not true? The majority is for that care and repair, or is it?
Actually, the opposite.
It's the Meals on Wheels is a majority of that.
Right. Of the 32,000, 23,000 is distributed for the nutrition program, and the other 9,000 to the home chore program.
Right. Follow up on that.
Sure.
Actually, that's a really interesting thing, because that represents less than where we started with when we started that program long ago through the U of I. It was a demonstration project, kind of care and repair is what it used to be called, to try to keep seniors in their home. And the purpose for us as a community, too, is keeps the housing stock up. It's a safe environment. So this is a program that has continued to serve a significant number of people and really has not grown in its monetary cost to us really at all. In fact, it started out at $10,000 long ago, and now it's at $9,000. But this is actually one of the most cost-efficient programs I think we've run in many respects for that reason. So it's an excellent program. And I would, can I follow up?
Sure.
Which is on the seniors assistance program. Again, that is for the social work services that we have for seniors. And I'll just throw in a commercial right now, which is Metropolitan Family Services doing their major fundraiser, their major gala on May 7th. Anyone who would like to have a ticket to that, please see me. It's the best way to support folks in this community. So that's a commercial advertisement.
Well done.
Wanted to get that in. Slick, wasn't it?
We love to advertise up here, right? There we go. Very good. Any other questions? So pretty much we've maintained the levels, which are already, I think, at they're at sufficient levels. We could fund more. It'd be nice if we could, but given the economy, we're doing the best we can and trying to maintain their levels of funding which I think they'll be happy about, because I know the state and, you know, all the other areas are really cutting areas like this, and puts more and more pressure on local municipalities again to step up, so. Next.
Next is the next page, 172, Health Services. It's the ambulance contract and mosquito abatement contract. Both of those contracts are being, I think, aggressively managed. The fire chief, the committee in support of the fire chief negotiated an ambulance service contract with some favorable terms, resulting in the city eventually going to get some hardware, the ambulances themselves going forward, trying to maximize that service, the users, maximize insurance proceeds to help. The city of Elmhurst steps in as needed to make contract terms be met after the necessary collections are received by the service provider. Mosquito abatement, there's a serious effort at larviciding control to minimize the adult mosquitoes becoming adults, and then as the adults are adults, we do checks and traps to and check for the disease-carrying mosquitoes, and then do adulticiding, adult control to minimize spread of disease, and some nuisance spraying to keep the nuisance mosquito issue to a tolerable level, especially prior to big weekends.
Very good. Alderman Healy.
Quick question, I think I know the answer, but I just want to make sure. Mosquito abatement, how many applications is that for? And then and I assume that's the same number as we had last year?
I think the contract provides for the same amount, and we pay as they're utilized. Mr. Hughes?
The contract includes 6 adulticidings, which is the same as last year, but was reduced by 2 from the year prior.
Thank you.
Next item is contingents. This is a new area. Years before, the city budget did provide for a contingency account. We found that with the council's encouragement, the city staff would stay significantly back from that referred to fence from spending. So we would not spend the defense. There would inevitably be a significant amount of dollars not spent. But because we're budgeting so closely and aggressively, and budgeting with a lot of deferrals on maintenance and deferrals on some construction areas, and anticipating some grants, it was our thought that we needed and would recommend that a $100,000, it's modest, but $100,000 line be budgeted for as contingent, available for the city council to authorize spending of, but to provide for a fallback position if some significant bad thing were to occur affecting the budget. We would have $100,000 set aside for that contingency. Ideally, it won't be spent, and it is financed by the Capital Improvement Fund.
Very good. And I believe this is because we're deferring some of those capital improvement costs. We're using some of those dollars to help out with the operating a little bit. So if we don't buy a piece of equipment and it should break, we've got a little bit of cushion in case there's a problem. Alderman Brown, I think you had a hand up. And
Yes, thank you. I have 2 questions, actually. One of which we have, I still believe we have, even though the balance might be close to 0, a working cash fund. How does this contingent account differ from the working cash fund? Because I thought the working cash fund was just that. In case of an emergency situation, we would utilize those funds. What is the difference between working cash fund and this relatively new line item?
Well, the working cash fund is not part of the budget. We're proposing that this contingency be a part of the budget. The city council, with a recommendation in the past from the staff, has accessed the working cash fund, and that working cash fund has been accessed now to the point where I believe the fund balance is less than $40,000, so there's not much left in the working cash fund.
Right.
And so the staff recommends, and it's your self-imposed policy that we have a 3 to 4 months fund balance. We're way down on that. I think the other component, if there was a 3 to 4 months fund balance, there would be another opportunity just to use fund balance. But because we're so thin on fund balance, no money left in the working cash fund, felt that there needed to be some fallback position within the budget.
And the follow-up to that then is this something that we do need to budget? If we're taking it from the capital improvements fund, or that's the proposal here, that could be done at any time with council approval. So isn't that something that when the need comes, we can revisit this? Or what is the necessity of actually budgeting it compared to doing it when the need occurs?
We wanted to provide in the capital improvement fund that there'd be $100,000 not in the capital improvement fund, but set aside to be available for the general fund for the contingency. And when you look at the fund balance for 5 years in the capital improvement fund, if I recall correctly, there's 3 of the 5 years have got a slight positive balance. 2 of the years has got a slight negative balance. So even with this $100,000 from the capital improvement fund, which is where staff is recommending it come from, the capital improvement fund is pretty tight.
So the staff is more concerned with general operating compared to capital projects? And that's the message I'm getting from this line item.
Ideally, we go back to the 80-20. The revenue of the state income tax flows 80% into the capital improvement fund, 20% into the general fund. It's very important to have a solid revenue flow for capital improvement areas. But in this, as it's now being referred to, Great Recession, which is so significantly affecting municipal revenue sources, I believe it's only appropriate that we go back and take a look at that capital improvement fund. And I believe our calculations were that this year's revenues are 50-50 split, half in the capital improvement fund and half are going into the general fund to keep our general services at the level that they need to be, our staff perspective. And I'm hearing from most of the council the same way. We need to keep our services up as strong as possible. That's where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, my concern is, and you've you've actually stated points to it, is that we are dipping a lot into the capital improvements fund for general operating, and this is just another line item on top of that. Right. So my perspective was, if we don't need to do it today, we can do it when the need arises, that maybe that's a better option to do it when the need arises compared to budgeting it immediately.
It's probably a semantics. Certainly this $100,000 doesn't get accessed by staff, it gets accessed by the city council. There'd be a collaboration between the staff and the council in that regard. Just at this point, recognize that there's $100,000 that's been taken out of the capital improvement fund to be available for the general fund. And we've got the balances then that we see.
Thanks.
We don't spend it, we keep it in the capital improvement fund. It becomes a fund balance, just like it would in your own checking account. If you wrote the check, but then you didn't actually need to send the check, it's still in your fund balance. We're hoping we don't have to send this check.
That's right. Alderman Pezza.
Just a quick question. So can this money be used for, if need be, anything and everything, or just certain items, or how?
Anything that 8 of you agree be spent on.
Okay. So there's no limits as to what it can or can't be used for? Okay.
Very good.
Well, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Alderman Healy.
Question following up on Alderman Pezza's question. So anything that comes out of that has to get city council approval, so city manager to spend up to $20,000 does not apply here?
I wouldn't go there.
Okay. Thank you.
Very good. I think with deferral of, you know, maybe
Yeah,
capital.
the 20,000 is authority of the city manager. City manager, by your municipal code, provides the city manager with the authority to go up to $20,000 in contracting for things or purchasing of things, but it has to be in the budget. So if it's a question mark, it's not going to be in this contingency. So from my perspective, it would not have been authorized, even if it was like $10,000, it wouldn't be authorized for the manager to spend it unless it was in the budget.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay.
Next area is cable television, page 175. Programs are pretty much as they have been in the past. A very small percentage of the franchise fees which accrue to the city from the Continental was the original cable provider that has now morphed several times into Comcast, and then
Xfinity now, yeah.
AT&T. Those two are the cable franchise providers for the Elmhurst community. There's franchise fees they both collect. They return to the city of Elmhurst. A portion of those finance the cable television budget. All part-time employees, no full-time folks employed.
Alderman Brown?
So my only question here is, by reviewing the accounts payable over the past few months, for example, in February, we spent approximately $3,200 on the professional services aspect of the cable TV, and this month, we're close to $5,000. It seems like it's going up instead of staying consistent in these trying times, or going down. Is there a reason for the increase, and are we afraid that we will surpass our current budget line items?
It recently been up because of the typically it's just the first and third council meeting, but because of the committee of the whole meetings, we've had committee of the whole meetings for the budget process. So all of that, that's why recently they've been up a little bit, but that's it.
Okay, so there wasn't any additional programming that we would see a surpassing of the current budgeted amount? Okay, all been budgeted, thank you.
So you mean the longer that we talk, the more expensive it is?
Point well taken, Ms. Alderman Nybo. And I ain't too pretty, so I don't want to be up there on TV too much. Not with this nose. No, I'm kidding. Anybody else? All right.
Mr. Mayor,
Oh, Alderman Kennedy.
would there be a savings if we offered these meetings only online versus via cable?
No,
Left the table.
No, not at all.
it's a taping, and it's one individual that monitors the automatic equipment. So on the station, that doesn't cost dollars. That's part of the franchise fee. Is we, as a city, have time available on the cable stations.
Alderman Mulliner.
Yeah, I was just going to respond and tell you that the franchise agreement calls for us to have free access to a number of channels, and that happens to be the one that we're broadcasting on. So our cost is actually having somebody sit in the back and tape this right now.
Oh, cable company calls this priceless. You know, interfund transfers is page 177. It's just debt service. 178, 182 into the capital improvement fund. We have reviewed this in a general way. Towards the back of the budget book is the five-year capital expenditure budget. You've got there the 5 years of the five-year capital expenditure budget. These pages 178 to 182 are the 2 years of the 5 years. They're pretty much the first 2 years of the 5 year that we reviewed earlier. There've been a few changes. As an example, in the Addison Street, that parking deck that's a big part of the Addison Street project, it was in the second year of the 5-year capital budget. Operationally, we don't believe that can happen quite that fast, so we've shifted that significant debt into the third year, so it doesn't show up in the 2-year operating budget, but still is in the 5-year capital budget. It's more of a timing issue. Motor fuel tax, 206, 211. Again, the motor fuel tax is collected by the state of Illinois and distributed back on a per capita basis. Again, one of those items that is important for the census to be as accurate as possible. Elmhurst will get its fair share of the state of Illinois' population. Motor fuel tax would be part of that. There's less gasoline being sold, less than motor fuel tax being collected generally by the state, so Elmhurst's share is less than what it has been in the past. We've had to shift out of MFT some of the staff to go negative in the MFT fund. This is what is charged, 206, 211, and I think more appropriate for next week, but we'll chat a little bit next week as to the budget plan that does anticipate that there would be a motor fuel tax increase. But we'll deal with that more next week than tonight. This is the expenditure side tonight.
So that's not included here, right?
The motor fuel tax, based on what the task force recommended, is that included in this budget?
Yes, the local motor fuel tax is included, but not in the motor fuel tax fund, but in the general fund.
In the general fund, okay.
So that 250,000 estimate is in the general fund revenue.
Okay.
The motor fuel tax that the state collects as part of the state motor fuel tax, the city of Elmhurst is obligated to spend that on a very strict state regimen for motor fuel tax expenditures. A local motor fuel tax, the city of Elmhurst, city council can designate a local motor fuel tax to go wherever you want it to go. We've built into the budget plan that should a local motor fuel tax be implemented, that would be dollars going to the general fund. So the budget we prepared for your consideration has a motor fuel tax local, but that revenue goes to the general fund, and that revenue doesn't have the strings associated with it that the state MFT does.
Gotcha. Very good.
Parking system fund, 241, 249. Again, we'll spend more discussion next week on the staff plan that the $1.50 a day on parking gets moved to $2. This parking system fund on revenues does anticipate that revenue adjustment. These are the expenditures, and then the revenues on pages 241, 249 for the parking system fund. I mentioned earlier that significant expense for the Addison Street parking deck that would be behind and above the retail proposed. That would be in the third year out, so you don't see that in the 2-year operating budget here.
Question? Other expenses more than double on the parking system? 201,500 estimated this year, 451,500 next year.
You asked what line item?
There's no line item. It's
What page?
242. 242 under expenditures.
Okay, yeah.
On page 248, you'll see the other expenses. It's actually depreciation. And the increase is because of the new deck on Larch and First.
Depreciation.
This is an enterprise fund, so we treat it like a business, so we do actually record depreciation in the municipal utility fund and in the parking fund. Those are our two enterprise funds.
Okay. So then the offsetting revenue from the incremental deck is where? Is that charges for services? I'm going back to 242. Because if we're going to realize the depreciation in the first year, I would assume we're realizing revenues, and so the
Correct.
193,000 incremental revenue is from the new deck?
A lot of it. Some of
Yeah,
it.
some of it, and
Well,
then,
but a lot of it's the
$1.50
$1.50 to 2.
correct.
So we're gonna realize more expense in year one than,
We will probably realize more expense every year with the parking system, just because it's so difficult to charge really what it would cost to build a deck, to charge those fees.
It's like every one of the parking decks, we've got 2 parking decks, each of which were first built and then expanded. So there was 4 parking deck projects. Now there's the Larch Street parking deck project that's under construction. That'd be our 5th parking deck project as a community. All 5 of those did have a significant grant from Metra, which is in part an Elmhurst success, that the $2.5 million was a grant for Larch Street, which we're continuing to work that grant commitment. We're beginning to pursue ways to get help for the Addison Street deck, but those capital opportunities are becoming less and less of an opportunity. But we are counting on that $2.5 million grant for Larch Street to help the parking fund and help the capital improvement fund.
and that would reduce the depreciation expense? No? Okay.
Yeah, the budget anticipates that $2.5 million. So if the 2.5 doesn't come, then we got to change the budget. So this is what we do have to spend, what we do collect.
The depreciation schedule for the new deck is over how many years?
I believe it's 20 years.
And is it 250,000 all 20?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Alderman Morley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question. Mr. Borchert just said something I want to make sure I understand. First, real quick question. If it hasn't been mentioned, maybe I missed it. The parking is an enterprise fund, is that correct? So when you said that, but capital improvements to parking in general fall outside the enterprise fund? So when you said that a $2.5 million grant, hopefully that we're going to get, would help parking fund and the capital improvement fund? Is that what you said, and can you clarify?
That's what I said. The parking fund funds the parking enterprise. There's no way that a parking deck is going to operate at $1 a day or $2 a day or even $3 or $4 a day, frankly. So there needs to be some magic as to how does it work. It works because of the capital improvement fund helping and grants helping.
I understand. Thank you.
Very good. Alderman Nabo.
Are we pursuing a second federal grant for the parking deck?
I'm referring to the Addison Street deck, which is 3 years out.
As for the Addison Street, the second federal grant is for the Addison Street?
We're just beginning to pursue opportunities. We received a commitment of a metric grant for Larch and First of $2.5 million.
Just for the record, that was received after we started this, so this was money that we didn't necessarily know we were going to get until we went out and tracked it down, and kudos to staff, and then Senator Pankow and Mr. Pagano at Metra for working it out. So it was a collaborative effort. So this would have happened regardless of the grant money. It just, given our budget situation, it's definitely going to help us, because if we didn't get the grant, we'd have $2.5 million less to work with.
The first approvals were without the grant, continue to work seeking the grant. So and Mayor DeCiani and members of the council helped as well with the lobbying effort.
But there is a second grant, though, separate from the Metro one that we're pursuing. What did DuPage mayors and managers just approve? I thought it was something in connection with.
Oh, yes. That's a ERA grant for surface parking along the First Street and Park Avenue, actually in the street right-of-way and adjacent to Union Pacific Railroad right-of-way, surface parking.
Okay.
Smaller, much smaller grant. It was $300,000.
But that's not reflected on the parking fund.
It's in the It's in the capital budget or the parking?
I believe that's in the capital, in the CIP
The
fund.
capital budget. And that was, I think the ERA funds pay for everything but the engineering. But, so that'll be a revenue and then an expenditure, but the expenditure's covered with the revenue.
Alderman Brown?
Yeah, going along with your statement, City Manager Borchert, Union Pacific right-of-way, on page 247, line item 3059, rental off-street parking, with all the additions that we're doing up and down First with additional parking, you know, is this, and I'm not 100% sure on what this actually, what location this is, but is this even necessary in the near term?
Semantics, I think, is in play here. It's rental, it's part of the lease with the railroad, and the lease provides that the city makes a collection of the daily parking fee, and then as rent, pays back to the Union Pacific Railroad their share of that daily fee until, I think actually, the early lease is provided that the city collect all of the dollars until the city paid its capital investment back, and then the railroad began taking a cut of the collections. Their new contracts, they start collecting day one. So these are the railroad's percentage of the collections as a result of that parking actually being on a railroad right-of-way.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Question on the depreciation, is that considered a paper expense, meaning that it's really not cash out of pocket? So that would actually, being a businessman that buys a lot of equipment and depreciates, uses the makers, and I look at it as a banker, we look at it, and that's something we might be able to even add back as far as income, or am I thinking of it properly, or no? How bankers would normally look at that?
It is a non-cash transaction.
It's a non-cash transaction, so
That's
it's a paper write-off. Got it. Okay.
I mean, excuse me, I'm sorry, just to follow up on that. That's why the parking fund has $11 million in it as of, the net assets are $11 million because those are the value of
The value of the actual decks.
the decks.
Correct.
Very good.
Next section's a larger section, 250 to 292, but it includes the 3 tax increment financing projects as capital projects. 250 is TIF 1. TIF 1 is background information. Would have ended actually in 2009, but as a result of the collaboration with School District 205 and then the approval of the General Assembly of the State of Illinois, there's been a 12-year extension of TIF 1. And as a part of that, the sales tax part of the TIF, the Elmhurst Central Business District TIF is one of the few remaining sales tax TIFs. Sales tax TIF is allowed to continue to, I think it's 2013, not for the full 12-year extension, but there was an extension of the sales tax TIF as well as the property tax TIF. So the clock is running down on TIF 1 and both sales tax and property tax. Hahn Street is a potential project. Addison Street is a potential project. We've got the continuing facade renovation grant and then retail grant, both of which staff would wish to review with the DPZ committee at the right time as a part of the review of and revamping of an economic development plan. We've actually reduced the retail grant component in the budget from $50,000 to $30,000. Trying to finish the facade, try to finish the streetscaping over the next several years. TIF 1. TIF 2 is Lake and Walnut, the industrial TIF. That TIF will expire in about 2016, I believe. 23-year TIF. We've gotten to a very healthy position with the TIF. The city's expenses have been have been paid, and the increment is now accruing at a healthy amount. City Council has recently authorized and declared surplus significant dollars this fiscal year, which School District 205 is going to collect at the tail end of their current fiscal year, which is their budgeted plan and for their need, which they appreciate. I believe they'll be coming to a meeting in May to receive a little check and a figurative larger check. So there's some real opportunities for the city of Elmhurst to manage this TIF going forward, which we're reviewing, and we'll certainly keep School District 205 posted because they are strapped as a result of the Great Recession as well, and the state of Illinois' inability to maintain certain commitments to education. TIF 2 is doing well. The area west of Walnut Street is in very good shape. The area east of Walnut Street is the area of opportunity. So we need to keep the TIF alive to allow for that to be harvested when the time is right.
Sure.
TIF 3 is the 83 in St. Charles TIF. This TIF, again, is in a pretty good shape. There's still some debt which the city is paying down on. The TIF ends in 2019. The only remaining significant expense left on the city is the acquisition of the remaining property for the relocation of the city garage, the Phase 2 city garage site. TIF 2 and TIF 3 are simply property tax TIFs. There's not a sales tax component associated with them. Debt service funds, 293 to 300. I'll let Marilyn chat on this. But again, these are previous actions approved by the City Council incurring debt, and these are the debt schedules necessary to respond to those.
Yeah, the debt service fund is simply an accounting rule. It's the fund where, at least on paper, we collect the dollars to pay the debt service that's mandatory for all the bonds that the city has outstanding. These are all the governmental funds. If there is debt assigned to an enterprise fund, being the utility fund or the parking system fund, you'll see that debt actually within their own budgets. But this is all the other debt service. The city has one revenue bond. You see that on page 297, and you might recall that bond was issued back in 1998 originally. It's been refunded once in 2006, and it was for the purpose of the loan to the developers, federal construction of the Route 83 site. And this is on the city's books, but there's none of this paid by the city. It's all paid for by federal construction. So the city receives monthly checks, and twice a year the money is spent to pay the debt service.
Last section, and I think I'm hearing the clock tick down here, but we're looking pretty good. Trust and agency funds are 301 to 315. Police and fire pension funds, these are an obligation of the city to maintain. The finances are from the policemen and firefighters. They contribute. The city is then obligated per the General Assembly to pay what the city, as the employer, needs to contribute to the pension funds. There's a small gloss mausoleum fund and what is now a small working cash fund, which are booked in these trust and agency funds.
Questions or anything? Just as a side note, I saw that Springfield is looking to pass pension reform, and I noticed after reading through the bill that
Police and fire.
doesn't do anything with police and fire, so I thought that was kind of interesting. So, I don't know how much reform we're really going to see out of the reform bill. So,
that's all we wish to cover. We really now covered the whole budget. We've got a number of items circled. We would suggest we'll go back to those next week after committee meeting and also revisit the overall budget, look at our revenues, revisit the revenues that were budgeted for, discuss what council needs to do to implement those, or if you wish to not implement those, what we would need to do on the other side, on the expenditure control side. And between now and next week, in a general way, Marilyn and Tom and the finance staff will work with Mr. Storino's legal staff to begin putting the ordinance together. I think they probably have already started working on that, so that'll be ready to go with whatever tweaks you would wish to approve next week. The budget then would be in ordinance form for the April 19th meeting on schedule.
Very good. And brought to my attention, we may have some people missing on the 19th, so depending on how things go on the 12th, we may possibly even, if we have a nice group of folks here on the 12th, possibly even consider voting on it on the 12th, if that makes sense. So,
We have to notice it?
we have to notice that, or no?
I don't think so.
I think we will need to have the ordinance. We have to approve the budget via an ordinance, and I don't think we'll have the ordinance
By that time?
really
Just
ready.
thought I would bring it up.
Right.
So a few people told me they might possibly not be able to
If we
be here
don't
on
get,
the
we need a majority of the council, so we need 8 to approve the budget.
Sure.
We do have a fourth Monday where there could be a special council meeting called, but we've had very good attendance.
Very good.
Do what we need to do.
Okay, any questions? A lot of material. We thank staff for their hard work and trying to do more with less and make it all happen and try and get us to even Steven on budget so we can hopefully pass the balanced budget and which is the ideal goal here for
Yeah, we'll
city council.
update the latest information we've got. I've asked and pushed Mr. Trozine, who is the closest to the state relative to revenues, to be as up-to-date as we possibly can be on revenues. They're not great, but they're beginning to improve. So there's some positives. We'll report on that as it relates to the budget and go through with the council again on the revisited items and the revenue items.
Okay, very good.
By Elmhurst.
That's right. Shop Elmhurst, buy Elmhurst. We need sales tax revenue. So
Shop
and-
anywhere but buy Elmhurst.
Yeah, I like that. Any other discussion? If not, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn. Alderman Wagner, Alderman Kennedy, all in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? We're adjourned.